When Jungkook makes a decision that signals a shift in direction, it rarely goes unnoticed. His choices are often magnified not just because of his global influence, but also because of the way they inevitably affect BTS as a group and HYBE as a company. In the fast-moving world of K-pop, where timing, branding, and narrative control are everything, even a single step taken by a member of BTS can create ripples across the industry. Jungkook's new decision, whatever form it takes, whether it is related to music, brand alignment, public visibility, or career structuring, opens the door to a bigger conversation about independence, long-term planning, and the future architecture of BTS and HYBE's empire. Every member of BTS has their own unique trajectory, but Jungkook's actions often hold heightened symbolism because of his position as the youngest, the so-called golden maknae. Traditionally, the youngest in a K-pop group is seen as someone who grows under the shadow of older members. But Jungkook's story has been different. He debuted young, yes, but he quickly gained the reputation of someone who could stand on equal footing with his seniors. Over the years, he has expanded his presence beyond just the music stage, dabbling in visuals, endorsements, and even personal brand building that mirrors the independence of Western pop icons. When Jungkook decides to pivot, whether in how he structures his projects, negotiates brand partnerships, or manages his personal visibility, the symbolic meaning is twofold. First, it demonstrates that BTS members are not locked into rigid molds under HYBE. Second, it sets a precedent for how idols can evolve from group performers to global cultural figures without severing ties to their origins. One of the most fascinating aspects of BTS's global success has been their ability to balance group identity with individual exploration. For HYBE, this dual approach has been a financial and branding masterstroke. The company benefits when BTS acts as a unified force, but it also thrives when members pursue solo ventures that attract different audience segments. Jungkook, as one of the most visible members internationally, represents the most potent form of this duality. His decisions, then, are not just personal. They test the elasticity of the BTS-HYBE relationship. If he leans too heavily into independence, questions arise about whether BTS's group dynamic can remain the center of gravity. If he stays too closely tethered to the group, however, the narrative shifts to whether HYBE is stifling the growth of its most bankable star. His latest decision highlights this ongoing negotiation. For HYBE, Jungkook is both an asset and a test case. He is one of the company's most valuable figures, but also one of the riskiest in terms of potential divergence. HYBE's future as a global entertainment powerhouse depends heavily on its ability to keep BTS members aligned with its larger goals while still allowing them enough room to grow independently. Jungkook's decisions often become trial runs for HYBE's broader strategies. When he collaborates with Western producers, it signals HYBE's openness to deeper integration with US markets. When he becomes the face of a global brand, it reflects HYBE's ability to position its idols not just as K-pop figures, but as universal icons. In this sense, Jungkook's choices are not isolated. They are test patterns for what HYBE will allow and how it will adapt. Jungkook's influence stretches far beyond Korea. He is one of the few K-pop idols whose name carries instant recognition across the US, Europe, and Asia simultaneously. This is crucial because HYBE is positioning itself not as a Korean company, but as a global entertainment leader. For investors, brands, and audiences, Jungkook's moves are markers of how BTS and, by extension, HYBE will function in the next era. For instance, if Jungkook chooses to reduce his group-centered visibility in favor of personal endeavors, it could lead to a redefinition of BTS's identity. No longer just a 7-member unit, BTS could increasingly be viewed as a flexible umbrella under which global stars operate independently. That model works in Western pop, where members of groups like One Direction transitioned to solo dominance, but it challenges the traditional K-pop system. The fact that Jungkook is pushing this boundary means the industry is watching closely. Critically, Jungkook's decisions are not just about his own career, they also feed into the broader question: how do you keep one of the most successful groups in history unified while still allowing for personal independence? This is not an easy balance, and HYBE knows it. Too much focus on individual ventures risks diluting the group's collective brand, while too much emphasis on the group could stifle individual creativity and lead to burnout. Jungkook represents the most delicate part of this equation. His decisions signal whether BTS can create a model where both independence and unity thrive side by side. If he succeeds in balancing both, it sets a blueprint not just for BTS, but for future idol groups navigating global fame. If the balance falters, it could create cracks in the way BTS is perceived and in how HYBE manages its flagship act. The implications of Jungkook's latest decision are layered. For BTS, it challenges the group to rethink how to sustain relevance as individuals carve out their own lanes. His moves create opportunities for diversification, but also raise questions about group cohesion. For HYBE, it forces the company to recalibrate its strategies. HYBE must show it can support both the collective BTS brand and the personal trajectories of its members without letting either side overshadow the other. For the industry, it sets a precedent. If Jungkook proves that idols can maintain global influence as both individuals and group members, it reshapes the expectations placed on K-pop idols. The industry will likely pivot toward a more flexible structure where individuality and group identity are not mutually exclusive. For most entertainment companies in Korea, idols are not only artists, they are controlled assets. Their schedules, appearances, and endorsements are carefully tied to the agency's broader marketing strategy. HYBE, however, has presented itself as different. It positions its artists as partners, giving them a degree of autonomy that appears progressive compared to industry norms. Jungkook's decisions test the boundaries of this autonomy. For HYBE, the dilemma is twofold. If it restricts him, HYBE risks public backlash and the perception that it is holding back one of the most talented and globally appealing idols. If it gives him too much freedom, HYBE risks weakening its grip on the BTS brand, leading to fragmentation that could affect group-related revenues like tours, albums, and merchandise. This balancing act is not just about management style, it's a test of HYBE's ability to evolve from a BTS-dependent company to a sustainable entertainment conglomerate. Jungkook's decisions directly affect several of HYBE's revenue streams. Merchandising. BTS-branded merchandise has been one of HYBE's most consistent profit sources. If Jungkook increasingly brands himself independently, the demand may shift from BTS-branded goods to Jungkook-centric products. While HYBE still profits, it changes the dynamics of group versus individual branding. Global endorsements. Jungkook is a magnet for luxury and mass-market brands. His alignment with Calvin Klein, for example, was a global marketing event. If Jungkook prioritizes his own brand deals, HYBE must negotiate how those contracts interact with BTS group endorsements. Too much independence could cause conflicts of interest. Touring and concerts. Concerts remain the most lucrative pillar of HYBE's financial model. BTS's group tours gross hundreds of millions. If Jungkook's decisions signal a slower return to group touring in favor of solo engagements, HYBE may have to pivot its touring strategy. Investor sentiment. HYBE is a publicly traded company. This means Jungkook's personal moves can trigger fluctuations in investor confidence. A decision that looks like distancing from BTS might create concern about HYBE's long-term stability. HYBE has often marketed itself as a label of labels, managing multiple subsidiaries under one umbrella. From Source Music to Pledis Entertainment, it has tried to reduce reliance on BTS by diversifying its talent pool. However, no other act has come close to replicating BTS's global dominance. This makes Jungkook's moves even more significant. If HYBE cannot demonstrate that it can successfully manage both his independence and BTS's cohesion, its diversification strategy could be called into question. In other words, investors and the industry will see Jungkook as the measure of HYBE's competence in transitioning from a single group powerhouse to a true global entertainment giant. HYBE has aggressively expanded into the US market, acquiring Ithaca Holdings, home to artists like Justin Bieber and Ariana Grande, and establishing partnerships with Universal Music Group. These moves were designed to signal that HYBE is not just K-pop, but global pop. Jungkook's decisions directly feed into this strategy. As the most visible BTS member internationally, his alignment with global brands and collaborations with Western producers serve as proof points that HYBE can integrate into the Western market. At the same time, too much independence could blur the lines between whether Jungkook is a HYBE artist or an autonomous global star who simply has contractual ties to the company. This is the crux of HYBE's challenge: how to present Jungkook as both the crown jewel of BTS and an individual global icon without eroding the BTS identity that underpins the company's reputation. HYBE's executives understand that perception is just as important as numbers. Jungkook's decisions often force the company to engage in careful narrative management. If investors or the public interpret his independence as a sign of BTS's eventual dissolution, it could lead to instability in stock prices. Conversely, if HYBE presents his decisions as part of a broader strategic evolution, it strengthens the perception of the company as innovative and adaptable. For example, when Jungkook takes on a new project outside of group activities, HYBE often frames it as an expansion of BTS's global impact rather than a divergence. This careful messaging reflects how deeply entwined Jungkook's decisions are with HYBE's market value. The broader question is one of sustainability. Can HYBE sustain itself as a global player without being overly dependent on BTS? Jungkook's decisions are central to this answer. If HYBE can successfully channel his independence into a model where both he and BTS thrive simultaneously, it demonstrates that the company has cracked the code for long-term sustainability. If it fails, it risks being seen as a one-group company whose empire is vulnerable to fragmentation. The impact extends beyond HYBE. Jungkook's decisions also set a precedent for the K-pop industry as a whole. Other entertainment companies are watching closely. If HYBE can balance his independence with group cohesion, it will likely push the industry to adopt more flexible structures for idol management. If not, it could reinforce the traditional K-pop model, where individuality is limited in favor of group-centered profit maximization.